Book of Sethantes, son of Jehovih, chapter 10. Jehovih spake to God, saying, Steer thy ship to the south land, my son, and visit thy Lord, who is God of Vohu. And God went as commanded to the south, running close to the earth, over deserts and mountains. 2. But when they were a short way on the journey, they were met by the Lord, who had been apprised of God's coming. And the ship of the Lord came also and made fast to the vessel of God. And all the angels saluted and intermingled, having known one another hundreds of years, and some for more than 1,000 years. 3. The Lord said, On our journey, let us run through the valleys and the banks of rivers, for it is here that both Azu and man dwell. And so they journeyed, surveying the earth as they sailed above. The country was mostly barren and not supporting man nor beast. 4. But by the riversides man dwelt, burrowing in the ground to avoid the heat by day and the cold by night. And they came to places where the angels of the Lord were dwelling with mortals, having inspired them to make villages and to hide their nakedness. 5. The Lord said, Behold, O God, only the unseen is potent over man. Could the beast or the stones or the forest tell man to hide his nakedness? He would not. Neither will he heed his brother's voice. Without experience, man cannot be advised profitably to himself, for such hath Jehovah made him. Because man cannot discern angel presence, the angels alone can teach man and inspire him to new life. For they talk to him in his sleep, and show him what is for his own good. And when he waketh in the morning, he supposeth it was himself talking, and is ambitious to obey himself. Patient and of long endurance are the angels of the Lord. 6. God said, Will man ever know he hath been raised up? Will he be believing? Or will he too need go to some new world and raise up the first fruits thereof, and toils his hundreds of years with naked mortals? O Jehovah, how wisely hast thou sharpened the labors of the believing and the unbelieving. 7. Lo, man cometh forth out of the earth, boasting of his unbelief, saying, Except I see with my own eyes, and feel with my own hands, I will not believe. But thou, O Jehovah, hast fitted a labor for his eyes, and for his hands to his heart's content. 8. And yet another man cometh forth out of the earth, being believing, and quickly he mounteth to the thrones of thy exalted heavens. Great is the work of thy Lord, O Father. 9. The Lord said, Who knoweth thy wisdom, O Jehovah? Who cannot perceive thee in the foundations of thy everlasting words? Thou hast provided nurses for the new earth, and out of this thy footstool wilt thou bring forth many, who will in the far future time be laboring as thy Lord and his angels labor here. Of what expanse is thy wisdom, O Jehovah? 10. Thus they conversed and journeyed forth till they reached the throne and place of the Lord. And here they made fast their ships, and they descended down to the city of Angu, in upper middle of the continent of Vohu. 11. And the Lord now sent messengers to all the Ashars in his dominions, appointing 10 days of rest, and time for feasting and music, and dancing and worshipping Jehovah. 12. And so it came to pass that the angels of the Lord and of God held a reunion, being the first for over 100 years. 13. And then God went around about over all the continent of Vohu, inspecting the work the Lord had done, and he pronounced it good before Jehovah. 14. When God had rested the full time, he and his host entered the ship of God, and taking leave of the Lord and his host, departed on the journey, saluting the Lord with 1,000 trumpeters in the name of Jehovah. Chapter 11. And now came the long journey across the ocean. God said, Great is thy wisdom, O Jehovah, in the division of waters. Thy barriers provide nations against nations. A refuge hast thou made beyond the waters, and the evil man cannot pursue. But greater still are thy spirit oceans, O Father. The spirit of darkness cannot cross over, and the spirits of newborn peoples are not contaminated. Thou far-seeing, thou bestower of thrift into the hands of thy gods and thy lords. 2. The master of the ship provided well for the journey, and presently the vessel of fire sped over the water, high above the clouds that cover the ocean. Onward to the west, bleak and desolate, through the spirit sea, unseen by mortals. On the far-off borders, where the lands come to the water's edge, the Lord of the land of Thowri stood, stationed in a ship to welcome God to the great westlands. 3. And this was the land called by the angels in aftertime North Gautama, signifying the meeting of nations and the dawn of Cosmon. 4. God came down out of the ship and stood on the land, and a light of Etherian flame descended upon him, and Jehovih spake out of the light, saying, Hear me, O my son, hither have I brought thee. This land is the last of the circle, even as Waga is the first. Behold, when the earth is circumscribed around about with such as choose me, I will come hither with a great awakening light to the souls of men. 5. On this land will I finish the dominion of the gods and lords on earth, even as begun on Waga. Through thee and thy lords will I now lay the foundation for my kingdoms. On this land will I raise up a people who shall be the fulfilling of that which to the Ihans of Waga profess, for my chosen shall come out boldly against all dominion, save mine, even Jehovih. Look over this land, my son, and provide unto the time of Cosmon. 6. My prophets shall foretell thee what shall happen. Thou shalt look upon the mountains and strong standing rocks, and the thought of thy soul shall pierce them, and the impression thereof shall be as written book before the races of men in that day. Neither shall they know the cause, but they shall come forth in tens of thousands, putting away all gods and lords and ancient tyranny for my sake. Thy soul shall be my talisman, deep engraven in the land and water and mountains. 7. On this land alone shall not any lord nor god be established by the sword, for it is my land, which I plan for the deliverance of the nations of the earth. 8. The hosts of both the ships came and joined in gleesome reunion after 100 years' absence, and it came to pass that God traveled over the land and water of the great west continent. 9. And all the places that the Lord has searched out, to the east and west and north and south, even to the farthest boundary, were revealed and recorded in the books of heaven. 10. God said, And thou, my Lord, shalt mark out the place of the dominion of Jehovih in the founding of his kingdom on earth, and a record of thy labors shall descend through the lords and gods that come after thee, even down to the time of the coming light of Cosmon. 11. And the people who shall dwell here till that day shall never be worshippers of any lord or god, such as other people shall worship. 12. Let my seal be put upon this land, in the name of Jehovih, to him I consecrate it forever. 13. So after that time, God rested from his labors, and the Lord with him. And the Lord prepared a feast and reunion for all the angels in his dominions. 14. And they thus assembled and sang and prayed and danced and conversed on things long past and things of the future, reassuring one another of their love and high esteem after the manner of mortals of this day. 15. When the banquet was ended, God and his traveling host, in due ceremony and order, took their leave. Thus God departed. And when the ship of God was raised up and under way, the voice of Jehovah came to man, saying, 16. Steer thy ship, my son, around about over all the other lands and islands and waters of the earth. Go low down to the earth, that thy recording angels may witness the affairs of men and all the places I created on the earth and the waters of the earth. 17. Thus God visited all places on land and water, even where man lived not, as well as where he lived, and the angels made a record thereof in the books of heaven. 18. And the time of the journey and the visits of God to the places of earth and her heavens was 1 year and 7 days, and his rest was completed. So he sent messengers to Horeb, his heavenly kingdom, announcing the time of his coming, and he then set sail therefore. Chapter 12. When it was known in Horeb that God was about to return, Hajjah put all things in readiness for God's reception. 2. And there volunteered 10,000 musicians and 5,000 bearers of banners, 1,000 marshals and officers of the throne, and 100,000 receivers, to go part way and meet God and his companions. 3. And Hajjah granted their prayers, and they started at once, being the most majestic host that had as yet gone forth in the lower heaven. 4. And when they were a little way off, behold, God and his ship of fire approached in heavenly splendor. And the marshals met him, and lay hold of the hanev of the ship, whereon all the hosts did in like manner, save the musicians who sang and played. 5. And when they drew near and entered Horeb, Hajjah broke down from the high estate and left the throne, running to meet God as a child would run to its father. And when the multitude saw this, they all broke loose from decorous behavior, and gave full vent to their outbursting love for God and his hosts. And all the people came as a tumult in rivalry of rejoicing. 6. In a little while God and Hajjah turned and walked to the throne, ascending thereon, and Hajjah took his place. God sat on his right and ordered rain. 7. Hajjah said, In thy name, O Jehovih, I welcome back thy first son of earth to the kingdom. Thou hast bestowed upon him, and thy sons and daughters, as much as he hath glorified thee, by his labor and by his wisdom and love. So do we honor him in thy name and for thy glory. 8. God said, In thy name, O Jehovah, do I return to these, my loves. That I am returned, I glorify thee, O my Father. That thou hast made them to rejoice is the glory of my life. 9. And now a great light gathered up around the throne, so that many could not look thereon. And presently the power of Jehovah came upon Hajjah, and the voice of Jehovah spake through him, saying to God. 10. This is again thy throne, O my son. Thou shalt finish that which I have put upon thee. Thy people shall learn the manner of my kingdoms, and know that even as I make all, so do I rule over all. 11. Hang up thy traveling garb, my sons. Dismiss the traveling host, and resume thy seat on the throne, for I gave it thee. The voice departed. Hajjah rose up and stood aside, and the light fell upon God, and he resumed to the throne, and was hailed by the multitude of Jehovah's name. 12. God said to Hajjah, Because thou hast prospered my kingdom during 1 whole year, thou shalt be my companion and assistant, with power and wisdom to superintend all matters not direct with my lords. 13. Behold, this day have I set apart as a new day in heaven and earth, because on this day the sun taketh its course from the Hayden line, and from this time forth it shall be called the New Year's Day. For shall it be, from this time forth, the day of the relief watch in Horeb. 14. Hear my voice, O Hajjah, and ye of the council of the throne of heaven. That which I commanded shall ye proclaim throughout heaven and earth to all who serve me. 15. Because of the increase of the kingdom of Horeb, I will have the place enlarged, and the council shall no longer be called a council, but Moab, for it shall be an assembly over all councils below it. 16. And Moab shall no longer deal with the affairs of the individuals, even though they be lords, but it shall have dominion with the cities and kingdoms of heaven, and with judgments and decrees. 17. But in all matters of less degree, this, my son, Hajjah, shall have dominion. And thou, O Hajjah, shalt build thee a house in Horeb, near this throne, and it shall be thy house and the place of thy business. Chapter 13. So God enlarged the place of Horeb, and built 1,000 more pillars of fire, enlarging the circle and otherwise making it a place of splendor. And God called together the recorders from the libraries of heaven, and caused them to select 100,000 new members for the house of Moab, which is Parliament, choosing them for the highest on the list. In this matter, God said, 2. Seek not the most learned, nor the most prayerful for members, but choose ye such as rank highest in assimilating to Jehovah and to their fellows, for such are the first to become gods and goddesses. Jehovah saith, a strong man may do more good works than a weak one, and yet the latter may stand fairer in my sight. I open the way to the weak and the strong, to the learned and the unlearned. 3. God said, in all these matters, whatever man or woman hath put away self-desires for self's sake, serving the Father by laboring for others, is on the road to wisdom. And if the records show a sufficient time for growth in such a man or woman, whereby these virtues become organic, then choose ye that person, for of such shall be Moab. 4. So the laborers gathered from the heavens around about Agni, and built Moab within, suitable for the members to be seated according to their rank. And when it was finished on the same day, the recorders brought the new members, and they went into the temple to their respective places. 5. And when seated, God spake from the throne, saying, to thee, O Jehovah, have I built the house of Moab in Horeb, and by thy wisdom have I chosen the members thereof. To thee, O Father, I dedicate this house, and it shall be thy house. Give us thy light, O Jehovah, that we may not err. 6. A light descended from the heavens above, and fell upon the members of Moab, as a symbol of approval by the archangels, and presently the new members rose up, every one of their own accord, but the old members remained seated. 7. God said, above your heads I make the sign of Jehovah's name, in a circle of fire, and the cross, and the leaf of life. For by it are ye sworn to the Father's labor. 8. Hear me then, O my beloved. Ye are henceforth denied individual ministration with individuals, but ye are now become a unit with many, and with these must your labor and your love and your wisdom be in concert of action. 9. Henceforth must ye no longer say, what can I do for this man, or this woman, or that woman, or this child, or that child? For this is individual labor, and on the earth such ministration belongeth to the Ashars, and in Atmospheria such ministration belongeth to the Asaphs. But ye shall minister to organic communities who are composed of individuals. For there are communities for factories, and others for education, and others for treatment of the sick, and such communities exist both on earth and in heaven. 10. Ye shall divide yourselves into groups for this purpose, and every group shall have its special business in charge. And each group shall stand in Moab as one member of Jehovah's judgment seat. According to your talents shall ye divide and group together, choosing such department wherein each one hath the greatest wisdom and strength. Withdraw then, and thus complete your groups according to the rates my proper officers will assign, and then return again into Moab, and in Jehovah's name take the seats allotted to you all. Chapter 14. On the second day after the house of Moab was completed, and all the members were in their respective places, Jehovah spake through God, saying, 2. Now is the beginning of the second resurrection. Even as the corporean put off the corporeal body, and is born a spirit, becoming the first resurrection, so are ye putting away individual self, and becoming an organic community, the beginning of the second resurrection. 3. As they of the first are for individual self, so have I bound them close on the face of the earth. As they survived on the earth on corporeal food, so have I made them to survive in the lowest heaven on atmospherian food. As Moab hath risen above these conditions, so will I exalt the foundations of the house of Moab higher up from the earth than Horeb, and Moab shall be the lower house of my kingdom. 4. The voice of Jehovah departed, and God saluted Hajah in the name of the Father. And a great light enveloped the house of Moab, and the Essenars chanted a hymn of praise. Thereafter God arose and stood on the throne of Jehovih, saying, 5. Hear ye, O all ye people of heaven above and heaven below. The house of Moab in the beginning of the second resurrection is founded in Jehovah's name. Proclaim ye the words that have gone out of my mouth, to the east and west and north and south, and to the swift messengers of the arcs of the firmament above. 6. Glory, glory be to Jehovah, boundless and almighty Creator, present and full of love, wisdom and power, glory to thee forever and ever. Amen. 7. The house of Moab chanted a proclamation. The swift messengers assumed their respective globes of light and began to ascend in every direction, carrying the word to the exalted spears. 8. And God crowned Hajah, a sub-god of Horeb, and was proclaimed to all the quarters of heaven and earth, and the history of his name exists to this day as Jah, amongst mortals.